have been in therapy for almost 6 years at this point, and one of my therapist's preferred methods is something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. She says thoughts affect feelings, which affect behavior, which affects thoughts, so on and so forth. It's pretty effective treatment when you get good at it, and I think this is the sort of explicit message of Yena's Good Morning, that intentionally altering your perspective on something that bothers you can change your life for the better and make day after day not something super painful as it was for me many years ago. It's not a revolutionary idea, but a good one, and I believe it well enough, but in my opinion, that's hardly all there is at play here. I'm telling you, the former ISWN members have some kind of love for playing as and with gods. Yena's situation isn't necessarily the same as Eunbi's, but that wouldn't be all that fun anyway, would it? Yena has to contend with gods in order to create her narrative about positive self-talk and her sense of self-efficacy. It would make sense for the song to not be an apostrophe at all as she toys with her own mindset, but there are lyrics like "own you" and parentheticals where she questions people we are not privy to hearing, like when she asks about dancing. The song also addresses a baby we do not know, and the first line of the song, incorporates the title, indicating the mysterious subject is a constant in the same way as this song as a piece of literature. She also refers to a highway that had her lose her way, seemingly speaking of a higher power that even provides signs that do not promise much of anything, and she references the implications of the sun rising and thus having to face the day, and it begs the question if a god exists but has abandoned the speaker, thus forcing her into a harrowing life of responsibility. A god might aid someone they truly valued, but instead we know there are strange deity politics at play. But like I said before, the speaker wants to own this deity, and is that possible? The song itself toys with the idea of time often, the first verse talking about a dam of tears bursting, but in her past dreams, this dam already swept her away. It's a means by which she is able to catastrophize, essentially asking what's the worst thing that can happen, and if it'd really be that bad. A dream from last night, though, passes by her, actually bringing the unconscious into the conscious physical world. She also says yesterday is yesterday, but she'll think of tomorrow, a literal closing of a divide in syntax, suggesting the speaker attains a sense of flow that might perhaps put her in the seat of power. Passage of time is reliable, a device of efficacy, but time also seems like a deity in itself, waiting post-abandonment. Is Yena a deity, and is she in a community of deities like time on top of that? She says, let's go, but perhaps we are meant to question if it's a healthy thing to view oneself as part of this community, even if it might be one of power. She follows her heart, but runs it. What is it, and why does it suggest owning you is harder than we might think, yet a possible end goal? She has her mantras not to worry and to lift her head up, but she's not the song's sole influence at the end of the day. When she asks if the sun is up and what's up, it's broken down into chunks with someone else's directive guiding her speech. The external speech is clearly her and originally matches more parentheticals, but not from within the bounds of the actual sentiments of themselves. The external speech is clearly her and originally matches the parentheticals, this mysterious other's directive. When she starts speaking separate messages, though, we have to ask if this is dissonance or difference, what conflict between deities might look like on a page. They only take away the sun's guidance, however, like it's the center of the compass in a valediction forbidding morning, just as it's the center of the world at large and will persist even regardless of if it leads down the road less taken. She creates a sense of pacing to how she rewires her brain, though separating clauses properly, even if the end result isn't perfect grammatically speaking. There's a sense that multiple moral principles are at play and mingle here. Lower language can have higher power. At the end of the day, what is a good morning and who is in power here is largely a matter of perspective that can shift and change, and that is the entire point, in my opinion. After all, when she talks to the babe again, it's to herself in the mirror, a shift in language that could carry a number of ramifications up to you to decide. Yena didn't release just Good Morning, though. There was an entire mini-album, and I want to discuss the B-sides briefly as well. For example, I love Good Girls in the Dark. It's pretty me-coded. I mean, it starts by talking about headaches. I have chronic migraines and probably have had more days with headaches than without them in the entirety of my conscious life. And, combining the specific time and anaphora does convey that the issue she's speaking of is consistent. They can't breathe, but they also can breathe just enough for the one thing on their mind. And with this line, they kind of regulate the listener's response, pairing off something severe, phrased in a passive way, but with something desperately active, but still interpersonal. They even use the word when describing this as a grounding technique to convey that which does not feel unreal and unknowable. She uses apostrophe with 3 U's and juxtaposes those with this description of a rule broken. It's interesting because she's conveying separation within a stuffed line rather than something with more even lineation. But she also conveys this lack of knowledge, not even able to utter everything she doesn't know, though she gets out the how at the very least. There are a bunch of masculine rhymes in the pre-chorus, rhyming only one syllable, but they're pretty dramatic, even if none are in terse, simple sentences. When they bring up the titular good girls, she compares them to Pinocchio, which contributes to a point that will become more relevant later, but we have to ask if these girls are real or belongings. What does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be real? Can you try to be real like you might try to be good? What's the relationship between good and real? She demands you look closely, perhaps because you have less visual acuity in the dark, which might indicate a way to see deeper in terms of morality, but it seems like there is a sense of struggling still. She says she won't let them take her alive, so she is alive, but under some threat. She says, oh my, repeating the my over and over, like life might be a possession you can get a hold of again. Saving her heart is her apparent incentive, but she stuffs herself underneath the bed. Where belongings go, or where kids might think monsters hide, is also on the floor as low as possible. She presents a sort of dialogue specifying her own part in it, but also displaying the subject's actions without lineation, so it's all stuffed together and feels dense. She calls the subject dumb, something she actually does a lot in her songs, though I'm still not sure what the motif means. She goes on to set up the subject and her, you versus me, with the me coming last. You is in question while me comes out on top. She actually uses a dialogue tag to put their friends' statements in quotes like they're fake, and she confirms they know it. The it remains unspecified, but the sentiment is a decided confirmation. In the bridge, she conveys some dependence on an it versus you or this, which require no conjunction. Then she uses a dependent clause about crumpling her heart, physically turned to trash to discard on the floor, again lowering herself to this at least physical level. When she says, covering up all the wars and wounds to you, kiss away, there's no healing happening, but no worries either. She even says she should run for it, seemingly an allusion to good morning. Next is Damn You. I'm not gonna lie, I like this song sonically, but when I first read the lyrics, I found them pretty basic. Not bad, but nothing new. I see why I wasn't impressed, but there are a couple of subtle details I do really like in rereading them. I think those might be even more important to point out so people don't miss them. The verses frame opposing sentiments against each other back and forth while counting up and down. Then in the chorus, there are ideas of damning and loving and then doing both at the same time. They're overwhelmed versus singing a simple melody. In the second verse, she builds up to the mention of a bomb and talks about the world and everything as if they are akin, but not exactly the same. She also ends a bunch of lines with myself, but not in direct succession, so it's not quite epistrophe, but interesting to pose in such a way, and it conveys struggles in actually incorporating you and me, like there's this friction in the relationship. Finally, we have the ugly duckling. People say Yena looks like a duck. It's a motif in many of her music videos, but this song is interesting even if it's a bit short. This song also implements the word as if to create greater psychic distance between the speaker and her brain and behavior. The pre-chorus presents a complete sentence about stumbling, but that is surrounded by dependent clauses, emphasizing the idea of not being well grounded. She mentions tears as a way to transition into the chorus in which she bears her soul and how she doesn't like this transition and doesn't want to cry, even stuffing that same sentence in the same line rather than splitting them apart. It's as if this repetition might help temper her emotions. She catastrophizes about all of these different physical things except to cry. She calls the subject small and hateful but beautiful, and she gives the word beautiful extra weight with a comma, despite that part not being a full clause. She gives weight to an experience that she fears she might never have for herself. She also compares the unnatural to the natural, but in a way that emphasizes the disconnect and disparity between the two. However, she goes back to catastrophizing and talks about sand, something natural that borders water, and a different life, a different experience, a different bird from the titular bird. She embraces the new context, understandably so. The words of others, though, the hatred is both allegorical and deeply personal, and while others might relate to it in a beautiful way, she feels separate from the allegory. The song is, in the end, an apostrophe with a pretty clear subject. She has to present the physical disconnect in an emotional context, and she does it how she has done so continuously, by catastrophizing. Everything is going to be okay. It's a sentiment that wraps around Jigumi's like a warm blanket, because we've seen the way people looked at Yena, and we've seen Yena try to make it up to us when all we want is for her to be happy and make good music. I admittedly think her company kind of reduced the budget for the title track MV. I could be wrong about that, but I just want to go to a Yena concert and meet other Jigumis the way I've met other onces and felt a sense of community I didn't know I needed. She also just seems like a fantastic performer, and if you've never checked out her music, but any of this sounds interesting to you, please check out her stuff. I would really love if I made even one person tune into what she has to put out.
Everyone.